Hello, my name is Bridget, and I'm the Community Relations Director here at Responsum Health. And today I'm here with Kimberly, who is going to share her experiences with uterine fibroids. Hello, Kimberly.
Hello, Bridget. How are you today?
Doing so well. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for asking.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So, I'd love to just kick things off and start asking you how old were you when you first received your diagnosis of uterine fibroids?
I was in my I can't recall the actual year or age, but I was in my mid 20s, mid to late 20s when I first was diagnosed with uterine fibroids.
And how did you respond when you first received that initial diagnosis?
I was not pleased with it because I had heard about it. It wasn't anything new, but it was kind of like, oh, shocking because I had not had any children or anything. And I was like, how is this going to affect the future of my health as a woman? So it kind of threw me off guard, but I dealt with it and said it wasn't cancerous. So it wasn't the end of the world. So I was okay.
I know that initial shock is common with pretty much any diagnosis, right?
I know. Exactly.
Were you offered any treatment options on the spot or after those few initial appointments with your doctor?
Well, I had the appointment, and when I found out, my OBGYN said that she would just monitor my fibroids, and if I had any problems, any heavy bleeding or anything like that, just to let her know. But we did not have any specific diagnosis or anything like that. We just played it by ear. And so I just continued to go and get my yearly pap smear and they just watched any growth in my fibroids. If there was a growth or um, any heavy bleeding, then it was time to have a consultation and talk about next steps.
Okay. And what did you take those next steps? And if so, what were the symptoms that led you to go into that appointment to follow up for additional care?
Well, I was sailing pretty good for a number of years. And then I do recall, I would say probably 5 years, 5 to maybe 7 years. And then I noticed that um, down in my abdomen was kind of bloated. And I started to have heavier than normal because understand, I was one of the ladies who had heavy bleeding anyway.
Mhm.
So it was more heavy. So with the bloating and heavy periods, and I was at my job and my stomach just hurt. And I just knew it was not a usual hurt. It was debilitating. So I went to ER and my OBGYN, she said that this was a result of the fibroids getting larger and just covering my whole uterus. So that's when I decided that I needed to take next steps.
What were those next steps?
Well, she had my, let me go back. My OBGYN had told me about a fertilization specialist. He was in our area. His name was Dr. Stewart, and he was doing research with women who had these types of problems who futuristically wanted to still have the option of having children without a hysterectomy. So after my initial emergency visit and then going to my OBGYN, I went to Dr. Stewart and made an appointment. And he saw the same things that my OBGYN at the time saw, that the fibroids were large. It was just one at the
Mhm.
time. Fibroids, it was large. And I mean that sincerely, it was very large. And he said, well, as of right now, he was going to do an abdominal myomectomy. And he said to me in that appointment that there is a possibility that you still might have to have a hysterectomy with the size of that fibroid.
What kind of emotions overcome you when you hear something like that?
Well, I had family. My mother, especially, she was very understanding and helped me through it, because that was like, wow, do I want to have surgery? I never had surgery. And the idea of that, since the size of the fibroid was so large that I might have to have a hysterectomy, which I was avoiding, I was like, wow. I was kind of depressed, but not really.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, okay, if this is the outcome that it needs to be to help me lead a healthier life or a better quality of life, then I'll do it. So that's, I went through that for about a month or two, and then it just got really bad, and I decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to get that myomectomy, with the thought that it could go into a hysterectomy. So that's what I did. I scheduled that myomectomy.
That's nice that you had not only the support system to kind of talk through it, but also the time to digest it and figure out if that's what you wanted.
Yes. And that was great to have your family support. And one has to understand, Dr. Stewart, he was amazing. He was like the best doctor. I mean, he didn't make it sound like doom and gloom. It's just that he told me what may happen, but he didn't tell me it was going to happen, that I would need a hysterectomy. But he did tell me that it was a chance that I would, because of the size of the fibroid. So I was prepared when I went to the hospital, about maybe a month or so later.
Yeah, it's so important to feel prepared, because I imagine in that scenario, it'd be so much more disappointing to have gone through the myomectomy not knowing you may need a hysterectomy and not have had that opportunity to, you know,
Exactly.
face those possible consequences that may happen.
Right. And I went to the hospital strong, and my health was good otherwise. And I just went in there with the idea that we're just going to do it. In the back of my mind, whatever happens, I am going to not have to worry about heavy bleeding anymore, any pain, or any bloating in my belly. So I was thinking of the end result, because just a funny story, it might not sound funny, but prior to me going to surgery, I was in a store, and I was just looking around to get my mind off of what was coming up. And in the store, and my mom and I were shopping, and a lady came up to me and said, "Oh, when is your baby due?"
Oh, no.
So my mom was like really upset by that statement, and I was a little bit thrown back. But that is how large, I'm telling that incident because that is how large my fibroid was. So that was just further confirmation for me that this needs to be done. The sales lady apologized, and she didn't know, but that also was in her behalf to say, well, maybe we shouldn't speak so quickly when we don't know the background of a person's health, or why things appear to look one way, but they may not be that way.
Yeah.
So, but again, it was further confirmation for me that the decision I was making to have this done was in my best interest.
So you mentioned that one of the reasons that you sought out treatment was to improve your quality of life. Your quality of life had started to been affected and you had debilitating pain and bloating. Did you see these improve after your myomectomy? What were the positive and negative outcomes following the procedure?
Well, after I came out of my anesthesia, the nurse that was in there, the first thing she said to me was, honey, you did not have to get a hysterectomy.
Oh.
They were so ecstatic about that because I was still in my 30s, had an opportunity. That was his goal. Remember, he's a reproduction doctor as well. He was elated. I was like still getting out of the anesthesia, like I'm doing okay. But it's like in the back of my mind, thank you, God, I did not have to have a hysterectomy. And all of my other symptoms, my stomach was flat. Yes, I was in pain, but I was doing okay. And it was great.
Oh, that's
It
so
was just exciting news. But then we go fast forward 10 years later, which are some of the, I guess you would say, drawbacks if you don't get a hysterectomy. This same thing occurs, and it was a 10-year span when I got fibroids again, even after the myomectomy. So we can start on that journey too, as well, if you want me to talk about that.
Yeah, keep going. So, did you experience the same symptoms as the first time around? What was different, or what was the same that you knew you had to go back because you've had some concerns?
Well, the first time was the myomectomy. I was in my 30s. So that was a whole different scenario with maybe having children or opportunities for children or just a good quality of life, which I did. I did not have my children, but that's not a bad thing because I have a lot of kids that I consider my children. So I wasn't mentally drained by that. But now fast forwarding, I'm approaching 50s, getting ready for menopause, and this is happening again. And so what do? I didn't really have a lot of bloating initially, but then as time went on, I saw the bloat again because this time it was 5 fibroids, not 1, like it was before. They could kind of diagnose that 1, but when I took the ultrasound, it was 5 or more. And there was a very large one in the same place as the one that they removed with the myomectomy 10 years before. So again, what do we do? What are the options? Well, I still had, and I saw the symptoms again, even more heavy bleeding, where you couldn't go if you knew it was your menstrual time of the month. Afraid to go out because I was a gusher. It was a lot of bleeding. It wasn't a little, it was a lot. So even more so than with prior to the myomectomy. So what were my options being in a menopausal state? Okay, do we really want to have this hysterectomy now that will just end it all? Or did I still want to hold on to my uterus? Good question. So I go to interventional radiologists. They do embolization, shrinking of the fibroids. I didn't know if I was a good candidate because oftentimes if you have fibroids situated in your uterus in certain locations, I don't know all the medical terminology for that, you would not be a good candidate. But they took an MRI and I happened to be a good candidate. The fibroids weren't situated in a way where they could not shrink them, which was great.
Yeah.
Although I had some underlying problems, because as women know, when they have fibroids and they bleed heavily, they become anemic. So they had to watch my anemia, because that wasn't a prerequisite for embolization, but you still want to have your health in a good place before you have it. It's an outpatient procedure, but you do have to spend one night in the hospital just for them to observe you, to make sure you're okay before you go home. So that was where I was at that time. I would say I took the MRI in March of 2020, and I scheduled it for August of 2020. No, of 21. Let me go back. I had the MRI March of 21 and had the outpatient procedure the end of August 21.
Okay.
And yeah.
Very recently.
Yes. And again, my blood levels, hemoglobin was at a good place prior to it. And my interventional radiologist, she gave me information, shared information of how the procedure was going to be done. And I did, and there was going to be pain afterwards. It may affect some women differently. Again, it is just about different women, their backgrounds, their health, everything is just all embodies how you're going to heal afterwards. So one has to remember that. Even though it's an outpatient procedure, everyone is going to heal differently. So you just need to talk to your primary care physician as well as the interventional radiologist to see how that all is going to encompass healing afterwards. But I did go in and it was painful. They do prescribe certain pain medications. I didn't really need that. That wasn't really the problem afterwards with me. I didn't take any of them, but I just was sick continuously from 6 to 8 months until I really healed. And that was due to me previously losing my mother and being her caretaker. So I was just exhausted. So with all that culmination, I did not heal as quickly as someone else who maybe did not have that happen to them or have that shock of losing someone play into their role of healing. So, but I later learned from my interventional radiologist that it does take 6 months to fully heal from embolization. But she said it did take you maybe 2 months more than others to heal. But I am healed a year later, and the shrinkage, I kept my uterus.
Yeah.
They took an MRI. Fibroids were down at that time 75 to 85%. Excellent. No cancer in the uterus. Everything's great. And no abdomen bloating. And I'm officially no longer have a menstrual cycle. But I am in the age where that would occur. So I am good and living my best life, being healthy.
So congratulations. That's such good news that it all worked out. Everything's feeling good.
Yes.
So
that's my story.
It's a great one. I truly appreciate all the details. I know so many people can feel alone in this journey. So hearing other people's experiences, I heard you touch on so many points that I've heard time and time again. And people just don't always know that it's normal, or they're not alone in experiencing these things.
No, not alone. And then I think this is it Responsum is really good because it helps other people that are going through the same scenario to talk and express how they feel. Hysterectomies are not bad, but that is not your only option. Maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago, that was just on the breaking point of finding out about embolization. But it is another alternative besides a myomectomy. Myomectomy is more invasive. Embolization is less invasive, only maybe the little pain. Well, it's not a little pain. It's quite a bit of pain afterwards, but not as invasive like a myomectomy. And you do heal. You can do things quickly. As a myomectomy, it's like a hysterectomy. You're out 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
I was out only 6 because I healed quickly. Some people it takes 8 weeks. Like some people healed quickly from the embolization, but I didn't. But there's circumstances. That's why your primary care physician needs to be a part of the process. I will emphasize that. And it took a long time. My white blood cell counts were low. They were high, and it shouldn't have been. But there's a process. It usually takes a year for them to get back to normal. Some may get back to normal sooner, but mine took a full year before the counts to get back to normal. And it was because of all the things that you go through after the procedure. So I just tell that story because, you know, sometimes all those little details are not told to you. And sometimes you understand what's going on with your body, but it takes probably 6 months to a year to fully heal, even from the outpatient surgery. Some may heal sooner, some may not, but within the year time, you're back to normal.
So I'd love to know, is there anything that you know now that you wish you would have known when you were first diagnosed?
That's a good question. Maybe the embolization before the myomectomy, unless you're going to get a myomectomy, I would suggest, I'm just suggesting, I would like to have a interventional radiologist or OBGYN or a surgeon confirm this. But if you're going to get a myomectomy for women, I would get it probably closer to menopause or after you have had your children, because that does not keep the fibroids from growing again, because they do. And so that's when I would suggest one would have it if they wanted to, is closer to menopause and after you have had the desired number of children you want to have. That was one thing. Then if you could have the embolization first. But there is problems with that because they're still doing research if that keeps one from having children. So it's kind of a 50-50 situation here, but those are the things that I would suggest. But again, I would like confirmation from an OBGYN or an interventional radiologist or someone that's more knowledgeable than me. But that's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
If I was thinking of what I would, if I had known what I would do. So I would kind of switch them around. I would have had a embolization, and then perhaps I would not have had to have a myomectomy.
Yeah.
But again, confirmation from a medical professional.
Yeah, and what works for one might not work for another. Everyone's got their own special set of circumstances, but it's always great to have options and to know all of the different treatment options there are. so you can really make a pro and con list.
It is. And I think that there's a growing field. I think there's a needed field for fibroids because it's a growing problem.
Mhm.
A lot of it does have to do with genetics, and it does, because my mother had fibroids, my grandmother had fibroids, but they didn't have to have any of the surgery because those are my mom and my grandmother. They had children prior to this problem, and it only occurred during the change of life, menopause. They
Mhm.
had a heavy bleeding and everything, and then it just stopped. And then that was it. They were through, and they had had their children already. So that was the end of it. I just wonder if I had already had children, if when I got in my 50s, if that would have been the same case. I don't know, but it is a hereditary. So that's something to think about as we go into research, and as we gather more information about fibroids. I don't know, they were doing this sister to sister test or the daughter mother test, but I think there's more research that needs to be done. That's just my thoughts.
So, to wrap things up, I would love to hear, what would you say to someone that is newly diagnosed with fibroids?
I would just say, don't think that it's the end of your life. There are options out there. Don't take one diagnosis, although you pretty much, if you have fibroids, you have it, but look for options. Don't just take the hysterectomy route. If you're healthy and you don't have any cancer in your uterus or anything like that, I would just go and find other options and ways to get rid of the fibroids. If you're a person that is okay with a hysterectomy, by all means, that's your choice. But if you don't, there is a myomectomy, and there's embolization, and there's other types of outpatient procedures that can help you with that. But don't get, what I would say is, don't get angry and upset. Get knowledgeable and find out what's out there, what's best for you as we fight this fibroid fight, I should say.
That is
So,
fantastic advice. Thank you so much. I
oh,
really appreciate getting to chat with you today and hearing all about your story and your experiences. It's been such a pleasure.
and I'm glad to tell my story. Hopefully, it will help someone else.
I'm sure it will. Thank you, Kimberly.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks so much for having me. Have a good day.